Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, this may not come as a bit of a surprise to anyone, but it turns out that Humza Yousaf is not going to refer himself for, breaching the Ministerial Code over the lies he told about renewable energy sources. He told them many times. He changed his story. He got civil servants to go back subsequent to making a claim to then produce a report that showed that his claim was substantively correct, but he couldn't possibly have known that at the time because there was no report, and so forth. But he's saying that there is absolutely no evidence to support the fact that he was a liar, even though there's actually quite a lot of evidence to support the fact that he's a liar, not least of which is he lied, quite obviously. It's been pointed out several times, and still, after being told that the numbers he was using was wrong, and he acknowledged they were wrong, he went on to use them again. What is wrong with the man? But when he is finally confronted and told he must present himself to the Ministerial Code Breach Committee, no, he won't, and denies that he ever did anything wrong. The problem we have is that this code breach can only be for ministers to report themselves rather than be reported by other members. It's got to change. They've got to be able to have anyone who is an MSP report any other MSP for the breach, and if found to be in breach, then they must resign, not just as a minister, but as an MSP in total. That way you'll start getting truth, or at least a little bit nearer to what actually is truth being presented. But we'll take a look at this, see how bad it is, but we all know Hamza is never, ever wrong. Here goes. So Humza Yousaf refuses to refer himself for investigation, despite simply false renewables claim. We know the story here. He's told this renewable figure time and time again. It gets pointed out to him that he's using the wrong figure. He then said at one point, "Oh no, I meant it per head or per capita," but there was no evidence that that even was a thing. He then went back and got people to do a report that showed he was right, but it was after the event of when he said it. He's a liar. He's a liar by omission. He's a liar by deceit. He's a liar by time frame. And in just generally, he's a two-faced liar, and you can believe nothing that he ever says because it's all lies. He says there's no evidence to support the claim that I may have misled Parliament, insists the First Minister, despite being presented with ample evidence, as furious critics rail about the lack of accountability and transparency at Holyrood. I would suggest, Hamza Yousaf, if you are so sure, and you're so sure there's no evidence, and you're so sure you're right, then you should have nothing to fear in asking those people to look into the Ministerial Code on your behalf, just to prove how right you are and to prove that you've got nothing wrong. Stick it in the eye to those critics. But that's not going to happen, is it? Because you know as well as we do that you're an absolute two-faced liar. Hamza Yousaf has refused to allow a Ministerial Code investigation to take place into his use of false statistics relating to Scotland's renewable potential. In response, Scottish Lib Dem leader Alex Cole-Hamilton accused the SNP government of secrecy and statistical gymnastics. Speaking in Holyrood on June the 22nd, the First Minister falsely claimed, as he has falsely claimed could just be about everything he ever says, but in this particular game, falsely claimed that he has the majority of, that being Scotland, has the majority of the UK's renewables and natural resources, which they don't, not by a long mark. 2 months later, he informed MSPs that he had intended to say per capita, but that even this calculation has faced criticism for being misleading. The misleading part was that when he said it, it wasn't true. That calculation had not occurred, and it was therefore complete BS. It's only subsequently, when he went back to do the correction, that in between they realised that this is where it had been worked out. So again, lies, shiftiness, evasion and deceit, the standard practice of the SNP. Anyway, it later emerged civil servants spent several weeks discussing how to explain Mr Yousaf's error, and correspondence released under Freedom of Information showed that per capita line was only suggested days after the original comments. This suggested that his explanation for the Scottish Parliament was misleading, with critics suggesting it had been reverse engineered, which of course it had, without doubt. Mr Cole Hamilton wrote to the First Minister to ask if he'd refer himself to the independent advisor on the Ministerial Code for an investigation, but Mr Yousaf has refused to do so and insisted the matter is now closed, just like he's insisting that the matter with the £11,000 iPad bill is now closed. It most certainly isn't. However, he did at least acknowledge that the Scottish Government wrongly withheld information. Gosh, really? Oh, they've never released anything without a crowbar. In his letter to Mr Yousaf, he said, "My intention at First Minister's questions on the 22nd of June was to say per capita in relation to Scotland's share of the UK renewables and natural resources. That is borne out by my request to have the parliamentary record corrected, but only after the civil servants had been to work and tried to do the calculation. They hadn't done the calculation prior." The Office of the Chief Economic Advisor has confirmed that the per capita figure is a fact and it is not something that can be fabricated by officials either retrospectively or otherwise. Of course it can. It's right. I don't doubt that the figure is right. I doubt that the figure even existed at the time you say you meant to say per capita. It literally hadn't existed, so you were not telling the truth. You were giving an opinion, not fact. And that, I'm afraid, is a lie. Anyway, in fact, the per capita figure did not appear in the highly redacted email chain, which was obtained by the pro-UK organisation These Islands until July the 3rd. Mr Cole Hamilton said it is extremely disappointing that Hamza Yusf has blocked a proper investigation into this matter. His original claim to Parliament was simply false. His revision, calculating Scotland's energy potential on a per capita basis, is an exercise in secrecy and statistical gymnastics. It is designed to confuse and to deflect. We live in a country with enormous renewables potential, but the SNP do that a disservice by dishing out one dodgy statistic after another. To make matters worse, the Scottish Government treated questions with a real lack of transparency. They never answer anything, do they? Everything is bullshit, cover-up, smear, distraction, everything. Because the truth is what ultimately damages them. They can't have the truth out there. It's awful. They were breaching in freedom of information laws by refusing to release key details about how this dodgy statistic was dreamt up. And he said people deserve ministers who care about accountability and transparency. But that doesn't seem to be on offer from the SNP. No, it absolutely doesn't. We all know that they can't release the truth. They don't want the truth because the truth is damaging. Oh, look, happier days. Happy days when Humza Yousaf, pointing to his latest lie. See, everything in green and that picture is a lie. And sitting beside him is another liar and a thief. And sitting this side of him, nearer the camera, is another one. May not be a thief, but certainly a liar and a fool who tells porkies about all sorts of things. They just can't help themselves, can they? Not one of them would ever know or recognise the truth if it bit them. What an obnoxious bunch of two-faced, absolute low-life liars they are. Coming up. While that reporting to the Ministerial Code is a matter for the ministers themselves to report themselves and not something that they can be subjected to by other people, they're never ever going to report themselves to the Ministerial Code. They daren't because they know that they'd all be in deep trouble. Whoever comes in next needs to change the procedure, needs to have it so that any member, any MSP can report a minister to the code if they believe it's been breached. And if it's been breached, they must resign as a minister. The very least. Do that. Labour, when you come in, change that and make that a thing. And then let's hold all of them to account properly. Because when it's self-referral and you're marking your own homework, the SNP are never, ever going to admit to these investigations to see if they lied. Because they know they have. Repeatedly, time after time, every time. Thank you very much for watching. That's probably the last one of the day, unless there is breaking news, in which case I might do a flash video. But I wish you a good evening and I will speak to you later. Goodbye.